Well guys, we're finally doing a video on countertops. We've been trying to get John on the channel for quite some time, but he's a busy guy. Well, today we finally got him, and he's here with us now, that produces this type of very beautiful granite. Since it's very limited on the market, and a lot of people like it, it's quite expensive. I'm learning things today that I didn't learn in school. How can people avoid common mistakes when working with a contractor to get countertops installed? There are some designers that really push and test our skill level. Hi, John. Hi, Igor. So, countertops. Here we are at Hunter Pass, 14513. This house was built on a slope, and it's less than 2,500 square feet. We finally got to the point where we could install the countertops, and it seemed like it would be a pretty simple job. However, in reality, it required a lot of time and effort. There were numerous details we had to work through. John, we met 3 years ago in business school, and I remember you saying you've been doing this type of work your whole life. Yeah, I've been doing this since 2012. It would be great if you could share your insight with our viewers. What's the process like? What's the first step and the second step and so on? And how can people avoid common mistakes when working with a contractor to get countertops installed? The first step I would recommend is to scope out some of the contractors that are in your area and find out what types of countertops are available locally. Of course, your home builder will recommend his own contractor, but there's two sides to that. You can be sure that the work will get done, but on the other hand, you won't know for sure if it's being done at a fair price for today's market. Some home builders mark up the price for the countertops. Typically, they'll just give you a general idea of what stone they'll be using and what features there will be. For example, there may or may not be a waterfall feature. If the client isn't working closely with the home builder, they may install a waterfall feature when you don't really need it, and it can really make the cost add up. Another example is with the sink. Maybe they'll do a top mount sink, or maybe an undermount sink. Yeah. So, the first step is figuring out exactly what you want. And that's an important aspect of setting a good budget. The next step is to go to the stone supplier and look in person at the countertop options. Everyone's going to have their personal preference. Some people like gray stone with simple patterns, but others might find it too bland or boring. By going to the warehouse, you can see what options are on the market if you don't know, and you can choose from their selection. So let's say we found our contractor and our stone. What's next? The next step is going to be to meet with your installer on site. They definitely don't need to be ready to install, it's just to walk through the project. You need to talk about the details. Check for any snags or hitches that might make the project difficult. And, very importantly, you want to simply get to know your contractor and see how they work before you commit. It's important to collaborate and find out if there's anything that might turn into extra work for the project, and then figure out how that will be handled. For example, maybe you'll need an outlet installed in the waterfall feature. Maybe one isn't a big deal if it's $50 or $100. But what if you need 10 in different areas? So that's because the contractor will have to cut out a hole. That's additional work for them. Yeah. Another example is with the sink. Typically, they will only drill one hole for the faucet. But what about a soap or a hot water dispenser? If additional holes are drilled, it's going to cost extra. Sometimes the countertops are installed, and then afterwards, you realize you need a hole for the garbage disposal switch. All that will affect the cost, and in the end, it can really add up. They can even make you go over budget on the project. So it's a good idea to find an experienced contractor that has multiple reviews. Okay. And at what point should I start looking for a contractor? The sooner, the better. When the cabinets are ready, you can start even earlier than that. Okay. While you're looking at furniture and decor, you can also be doing your initial countertop research. Initial? Yeah. So finding out what style countertops you want and who's going to install it. Okay. So let's say we've chosen a contractor, picked out the material, and ordered the right amount of stone. The cabinets will then need to be installed, and after that, the contractor can come and take all their measurements and install the countertops. After the countertop installation, there's another very important step, and that's checking the quality of the work. So this sink was delivered late, and because we have a deadline, I asked you to install the counters anyway. But you told me, no, we need to wait for the sink. Yep. The reason being that not all sinks have the same exact shape. Sometimes during manufacturing, the sink's template is altered, which means you're going to have to literally custom size the opening according to the sink. I always make my own custom template for the sink. Most manufacturers give you a template in the box with the sink, and you're supposed to use that. Is it based on that sink specifically? It's not. Is it according to the model? They give you a standardized template. It's supposed to match the sink, but in my experience, it rarely matches. To make it look as clean as possible, I make my own template from that sink specifically, and use it to create the opening for the sink. This is specifically for undermount sinks. That way it lines up perfectly. Right, now it lines up perfectly because the template was made from this sink, and I do that for all sinks. Not just artificial stone sinks like this one. Let's take a look in the bathroom, because we've got a top mount sink in there. We had an additional challenge for that one, because the sink was fairly big, and the counter was somewhat small, and had a backsplash. Mounting it was a little tricky because it was a tight space. Okay, here we are in the bathroom where we've got our vessel sink, also called a top mount sink. So, what's unique about this one? I can see we've got a backsplash here. Yeah, we use a backsplash for all our projects to protect the decor on the walls, which in this case is wallpaper. And here we have white walls, from splashes of water. Yes, from water splashing onto the wall or from any chemicals that might be used to clean the countertop. These top-mount sinks aren't as common. Most sinks are undermount. Here we have a bowl-shaped sink. With these sinks, it's extremely important to have a strong silicone sealant. It's going to get cleaned and scrubbed regularly, so it needs to be really resistant. It's important to check it goes all the way around, because we don't want any moisture getting under here and ruining the cabinets. Is choosing top mount or undermount just a design preference? Yeah. In your experience, how often do people go with top mount over undermount? I'd say 95% of the time, it's undermount. Why do you think that is? Well, I think it's due to the fact that it's more convenient for people to wipe the top of the counter. They just wipe it all into the sink. But for this little bit of convenience, they exclude a lot of other design options. I see. It's a pretty common opinion. Some people see a sink like this, and they don't even understand. They think, what is this thing? Yeah, right. They think, why isn't it underneath? Well, let's go look at another bathroom. Now we're in the master bathroom. Here, we have an undermount sink. A classic American sink. Right, a classic American sink. What's special about this one? Well, here we can look at how precise the opening was shaped and sized. And how the edges are polished. Yeah. We can also look at how carefully the silicone was applied. It's applied nice and evenly. It needs to be worked after it's applied? Yeah. It needs to be smooth, so that water doesn't cling to it. It needs to be applied evenly. It's also important that enough is applied so there aren't any gaps in the seal. We can look and check. There shouldn't be any gaps at all. Otherwise, moisture is going to get in. Furniture really doesn't like to get wet. Even a little bit of water can do a lot of damage. We also used a backsplash here. What's the standard height for a backsplash? 3 or 4 inches is standard. There might be instances where you want a taller backsplash, but that's usually a design preference. A taller backsplash would make the design and motifs of the stone stand out. It's for when you want to emphasize the stone. Sometimes faucets are even designed to come out of a tall backsplash. Well, then that makes sense why you'd want it. Yeah, there's a reason for it, but it's still done with design in mind. That type of faucet doesn't have any functional advantage to it. Have you ever had it where a client wants stone to cover the whole wall? Typically, a feature like that would go in the kitchen. Sometimes the client wants the backsplash to go to the bottom of the cabinet, or all the way up to the ceiling. Also, different types of materials are going to have different functions. Some clients are looking for a really functional countertop, a place where the family can have dinner, where the kids will do their homework or make crafts, where the Thanksgiving turkey will be, and so on. For that, you need a resilient material. And the motifs and designs are going to be second to that, with colors that don't stand out too much. So, what about durability? Can you talk a bit about that? For example, at first, I didn't understand all these terms that are used, like number 2, number 3, or level 3 and level B, thickness. What's that all about? Is that all about durability? Not really. There's two general categories. The first category is commercial. When you hear things like level 1, level 2, or level 3, they're talking about price. It's the cost of the stone, and it doesn't have anything to do with its physical characteristics. So it's a marketing tool. There is the marketing aspect, but I think it has more to do with the complexity of stone mining, and the fact that there's a limited amount of stone in the world. For example, there's only one quarry in Brazil that produces this type of very beautiful granite. Since it's very limited on the market, and a lot of people like it, it's quite expensive. So it has to do with customer demand and how that affects the price. It's kind of a mix of everything. The marketing strategy, the supply and demand, and just the fact there's a limited supply. Whereas companies like Apple artificially create shortages to raise prices. With stone, it could really be because there's only one quarry in the world that can produce that specific material. Okay, let's get back to the homeowner looking for durability. Right, I didn't finish about stone density. And I wanted to ask, what about cases where the homeowner wants a product that won't get scratched? Yeah, that has everything to do with density. It's a term that's used to talk about how hard a material is in terms of its physical properties. There's a specific scale that's used called the Mohs scale. All minerals are classified into different levels on this scale. Natural granite is classified into level 5 or level 6. The highest level that you can get, which can still be used in decor, will be level 6. Only diamonds are higher than that. And that's actually the mineral that's used to cut the stone. The stone is actually cut with diamond-embedded blades. Actually, in regards to which product today has the highest density and resistance to mechanical, thermal, chemical effects, it's an artificially made porcelain material. They make them in huge slabs in a similar way that porcelain tiles are made. So there's a layer underneath, and then there's a decorative layer on top. It doesn't scratch, and it doesn't chip. You could even whack it with a hammer. This is the most expensive material to date. How much more expensive is it than, say, quartz? If we compare it to a decent mid-grade quartz, like this one, this is mid-grade quartz. It's not cheap, and it's not expensive. It's an artificially made material, which is also quite dense, though about half as dense as porcelain. Porcelain would be about 60 to 70% more expensive than this quartz. That's pretty significant. But it's also a material that's going to last 100 years without changing in appearance. We need to try it for one of our projects. Absolutely. Well, I think it could be a good idea to go over the different materials that are on the market today, because a lot of people can get confused about it. The main factor that separates all materials is whether it's man-made or whether it's natural. Okay, so which ones are natural? Marble is a natural material. Okay, so marble. Granite. Granite is a natural material. Right. Granite is mined in quarries, cut into blocks. Right, and then shaped and polished. Quartz is a man-made product, or rather it's created in a factory. There's large manufacturing firms all over the world that have huge factories, and there's many videos that show how it's all made. Okay, but what's so special about quartz? Unlike all other types of artificial materials like acrylic stone or polymers, or various polymer concretes, quartz is made up to 90% or more natural quartz rock. Then dyes and polymers are added. Right. So there's these types of powders that's added and it's glued together. So the quartz is mined from mountains. Then it's crushed into a powder. After that, polymers, binders, and dyes are added to make these beautiful patterns. And finally, it's sent to an oven. Actually, what they're doing in the factories is imitating the natural process that marble goes through over the million years that it's been in the mountain. Marble is also basically a powder that's been pressed and heated for 1,000,000 years. So there's the pressure aspect and the heat aspect. The same thing is done at the factory, but over 3 days instead of 1,000,000 years. Awesome. And you get something like this. I'm learning things today that I didn't learn in school. John, we talked a bit about quality. I wanted to touch on the things that you pay attention to when you take on a job, and how it affects the final product. Although here you're still in the process. Yeah, we just applied the adhesive yesterday. Yeah, it was fascinating to see how 6 people were needed to carry in this quartz. It looked unbelievably heavy. But at the end of the day, you got it in here safe and sound. Okay, but what are you doing now? I see there's this silicone here. Is it silicone? No. It's a special type of adhesive, a resin epoxy. It's very dense. It reaches a density that's about the same as the stone. But it's also an adhesive. It's an adhesive, and it can also smooth out the joint here. We'll polish it either today or tomorrow, and it will work as a transition from the countertop into the waterfall feature. So, what else should we pay attention to? We should check for any cracks or fractures after the stone has been installed in the kitchen, especially if it's a natural stone. Although natural stone also has natural veins and textures, you can differentiate that from cracks. All you need to do is run your hand along the surface. If you feel any roughness, it could be a crack, but it could also just be the natural texture of the stone. I had a funny situation come up. I went to visit a friend with my family, and she said to me, "So, you're a home builder, right? Well, I've got a problem, an argument with my builders." Was this in the US? Yeah. And she showed me a crack and asked, "Can you tell if it's a crack or a part of the material?" Because I called the builders, and they tried to convince me it's a part of the material. That it's natural, right? Yeah. A natural vein, and they can't do anything about it. I did like you said and ran my finger over it top and bottom. The top was perfectly smooth, but there were little pieces of material underneath, and you could tell it was a crack. So what did I do? I took a light and shined it upwards from beneath. The light was visible through the adhesive that they used to polish it. In the end, she went to sue them. I thought it was a funny story. So you're not only a builder, but also a lawyer. By the way, the presence of adhesive or glues on the surface of the stone doesn't always mean it's a defect. It's actually a normal practice done by companies all over the world. Because before we get these large slabs of stone, from which we make all these counters, before we get to polishing it, it's coated with an adhesive in the factory. In the factories themselves, so in Italy or wherever it comes from, when they're cutting a stone that's as dense as this, sometimes small fragments can fall out. So they fill everything with a special adhesive. It's common practice. That's why I always ask my clients to go and see the stone before we start the project. If the client isn't happy with one slab of the stone, then we don't buy it. We choose a different slab. On top of that, before I start a project, I take a photo of the slabs, so that if the client doesn't like it, or if there's a misunderstanding, I have the photo and can show them it's the material that was picked out. But sometimes, builders break, glue, and polish the material during the installation process. There are some high-end equipment workshops that can resurface and repolish the material quite easily and convincingly. But that was a clever idea to check from underneath with a light. Rarely would anyone polish the underside. Yeah, I get it. But glues being present is normal, though that's not the case with quartz. In addition to being a dense stone, it actually also has a slight elasticity to it, so it almost never breaks. So you almost never have those situations during manufacturing, delivery, installation, or just with wear and tear, even if it's in a thin section like this. It's narrow there. If this were granite, we would cut a metal support bracket and attach it across that section. Then we'd use a special vacuum tool, which attaches to both halves of this piece, and using that, we can evenly lift the entire slab so it's safe until it gets installed on the cabinets. Once the stone is installed, if it's done correctly, it's not going anywhere. Okay, so the next thing you need to look carefully at is all the joints. There should be silicone on the underside between the cabinets here. There's nothing there now because we aren't finished. And at the joints? All seams, all joints. Wherever the stone comes into contact with another material, there should be silicone, so dust doesn't get in there and so moisture doesn't get in and create mold. Everything that's touching here, 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 everything needs silicone. Areas like this where there's an appliance, where we have the cooktop, it needs silicone. It's going to get wet and dirty, so it needs to be here. It's also important to check these joints after a few weeks or a month, because the cabinets and appliances can settle and the seams can split. So you can just re-silicone over it. You can just ask the contractor to come and reseal it. Alright guys, there was a lot of important information in today's video, even for me. I learned some things today I didn't know about before. So, thank you, John. You're welcome. See you on the next project. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and make use of the comment section below. Ask questions, comment,